The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a resolution setting rules for the Trump impeachment inquiry, the first formal vote on the issue in a divided House.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Members voted mostly along party lines. For weeks, testimonies have been conducted behind closed doors. These new measures will now make them public. Witnesses have been questioned about allegations the president pressured Ukraine to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden. Well, earlier, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, said the future of American democracy was at stake.
This Constitution is the blueprint for our republic and not a monarchy. But when we have a president who says Article 2 says I can do whatever I want, that is in defiance of the separation of powers. That's not what our Constitution says. So what is at stake is our democracy. What are we fighting for? Defending our democracy for the people.
And here's what the top Republican leader in the U.S. House, Kevin McCarthy, had to say.
Today is more than the fairness of an impeachment process. It is about the integrity of our electoral process. Democrats are trying to impeach the president because they are scared they cannot defeat him at the ballot box.
In a moment, we'll speak to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. But first, let's go to Heidi Jo Castro on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. So, no surprises here. As expected, the House of Representatives, the lower house of the U.S. Congress, has approved this measure, right, Heidi?
That's right, and the approval was largely along party lines, which is what had been expected. Of course, you know, Democrats control the House of Representatives. But what was surprising is that there were two Democratic representatives who defected from their caucus and voted with the unanimous Republicans in not approving this measure. Obviously, that fell short, and finally this measure was adopted. What it does in practice is it sanctions the continuation of this impeachment inquiry that has already, in practice, been happening over the last couple of weeks. But all of the witnesses that have come through thus far have had closed-door hearings with only scant information leaking out. Now, with this measure having been passed, the House will continue with the inquiry in the eye of the public by hosting public hearings. Democrats have faced accusations and criticism from Republicans saying that these proceedings have been too behind closed doors, that they're not transparent, that this is all part of a deep state conspiracy against Donald Trump. And now, having adopted this measure that will open the proceedings to the public, Democrats are in essence deflating or attempting to deflate that argument from Republicans by bringing these proceedings into the open. And what we've heard from witnesses thus far, according to their leaked opening statements, has been a pretty troubling narrative, as described by Democrats, of what Trump has done, using the power of his office, in their words, to compel Ukraine to open investigations into Trump's political rivals at home. And today on Capitol Hill was yet another White House insider speaking before impeachment investigators. That was Tim Morrison, who is the Russia expert on the National Security Council and named by previous witnesses as a key figure in the inner thinking of the White House at the time of the security aid being withheld from Ukraine. Morrison is telling another Trump aide that he had, quote, a sinking feeling when he learned that Trump wanted the president of Ukraine to go to a microphone and announce these investigations into Joe Biden. So a lot of alarming testimony, Sammy, that Democrats are hoping now will be brought into the public eye by sanctioning public hearings going forward.
All right, thanks so much. Heidi Jo Castro there. Well, President Trump tweeted his reaction immediately after the vote, saying simply, the greatest witch hunt in American history. Our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, is live for us in Washington, D.C. And as that tweet might indicate, he's not entirely happy at all with this entire process of impeachment. However, Might he take some comfort, Kimberly, in the fact that we didn't have, I think, any Republicans voting for a public impeachment process?
I think the president is going to take some comfort in that. Look, this White House knew the vote was going to be a foregone conclusion in terms of Democrats will unanimously or overwhelmingly vote for this to be a formalized process. They've made that clear from the beginning. So the White House was prepared for it. They have sent out a statement, the press secretary calling this already. We're seeing how they're going to characterize this, that they see this as illegitimate. The president has done nothing wrong, and Democrats know that, according to White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham. You talked about how this was bipartisan, and it reminds me of the last time there were impeachment proceedings in Washington. I was here for that. Back in 1998, it was a Democratic president in the White House. And when there was a vote, it was very notable. There were 31 Democrats that voted with the Republicans. So we saw that there was some bipartisan effort to prosecute President Clinton. We haven't seen that so far. But that was not the vote to impeach Donald Trump. That was the vote to formalize things. Now we're going to have these hearings coming out in the open, out of the shadows, if you will. Right now, the U.S. president has an enormous base of support that seems to be unaffected by the headlines so far. When these testimonies start to become public, we could see that change. We could then see some Republicans going with the Democrats. Hard to predict how this is going to fall out. But for now, you can suffice to say the White House, well, not surprised what happened from the president's tweet there, the greatest witch hunt in American history, clearly not happy about how things are going so far.
All right, thanks so much, Kimberly Halkett there. Well, Michael Isikoff is the chief investigative correspondent at Yahoo News and co-author of Russian Roulette. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us. So will the vote today go towards anywhere towards perhaps addressing some of those Republican complaints that so far the impeachment process has not been officially adopted and has been too secretive?
Well, now it has, and this is a momentous day that the House has now formally voted to authorize this impeachment inquiry. It makes it all but inevitable that President Trump will be impeached by the full House. There's a roadmap ahead for the hearings going forward, the public hearings in which the Democrats will be making their case to the public for why they need to do this. But I think there's something significant, legally significant about what happened today, which is that it does strengthen the Democrats' hand in two very crucial court hearings coming up as early as this afternoon. Charles Kupperman has gone to court after getting a request to testify saying, given that the White House is invoking executive privilege, is he legally permitted to go ahead and testify? And one of the arguments, that's going to be argued in court this afternoon. Separately, there's another court argument about Don McGahn, who was the White House counsel during the Mueller proceedings, who's also the Democrats want his testimony as well. Having the House formally vote gives the Democrats more ammunition to argue that Kupperman's testimony is needed in the impeachment inquiry. He was the deputy national security advisor. And if the judge in that case, Judge Leone, who's hearing this argument this afternoon, approves that, it almost certainly would give a green light to John Bolton, the national security advisor, to testify as well. If the Democrats get Bolton's testimony, that could be political dynamite.
It could be political dynamite. This vote does give the Democrats some more power, though, in deciding, or at least blocking, some of the White House's ability to call witnesses, right?
Well, under the resolution, if you read it carefully, Chairman Schiff, who will be conducting the proceedings, he's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, does have the discretion the Republicans can request witnesses, but Schiff has the discretion to turn them down. The resolution says the Republicans have to submit a written case for why they think somebody's testimony is essential to this impeachment inquiry. So, we'll see how much latitude Schiff gives the Republicans to call their own witnesses. I suspect the Democrats don't want this to turn into a political circus in which the Republicans try to call Joe Biden, for instance, or Hunter Biden, to try to make the proceedings about them rather than the president's own conduct. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how the dynamic between the Republican request for witnesses and how much latitude Schiff gives them.
We're obviously still a bit away from a final vote on impeachment, but is there anything to be read into this vote in trying to predict how the final vote might go?
Well, the fact that it was almost entirely on partisan lines is noteworthy. You had two Democrats, Bolt, who voted against. No Republicans, not a single one, voted for this inquiry. And if that stays the same after the public hearings, after the full transcripts are released, after all the testimony is in, if it remains a Republican inquiry, it's going to make it harder for Republican senators, who are ultimately going to be deciding the fate of President Trump, to vote to convict. It doesn't make it impossible because it's all going to rest on how strong that evidence is, how powerful the Democrats make their public case. But clearly the Democrats and Speaker Pelosi didn't want this to be a purely partisan exercise. Right now, it looks like largely it is.
All right, thanks so much for your analysis on that.